industry planning for 2021. So my name is Tommy Hayes. I am a food and nutrition analyst at Lux Research. Happy to be joined today by Enid Ng, Head of Innovation R&D APAC at Diageo, John Friedman, Director of AgFunder Asia, GanChoudhuri, co-founder and CEO of AIbacked, and last but not least, Indrani Ghosh, global strategy and insights head at Danone. So to help frame today's conversation, I really think there's two kind of broad buckets or two broad lenses that we can look through in terms of food industry planning. The first one, which I think we'll be spending a bulk of the conversation around, is new product development, product discovery and design optimization. Where right now the status quo is about 80 to 85% of CPG products fail post-launch. So how can we change that statistic for the better through the use of AI? And secondly, I'd be remiss to not mention production and consumption forecasting, which is more around supply chain. Because if we do a better job at that, we wouldn't be wasting 33% of all food that is produced. So hopefully that sets up kind of the framework that we're going to be operating in for today's discussion. So to kick things off, I'm really excited to hear from all of the panelists. How has their respective organizations been embracing artificial intelligence? So maybe Sam, we'll start things with you. What's the opportunity that AIbacked is seeing with AI, and how are you shaping a value proposition around it?
Thanks, Thomas. So when you interact with different organizations, we primarily see three types of organizations. The first type, they are the one who knows what they really want out of artificial intelligence. They are very clear about their objectives. Then comes the second type of organization. They are the ones who are still trying to figure out how they can implement AI for helping solve some of their business problems, but they know that they want to adapt AI and they don't want to stay behind. And then comes the third type of organizations. They are the ones who are not even aware that they can use artificial intelligence for their business related goals. So the way we interact with them is quite different because of the stage that they are in terms of AI adoption. So the first type of organization who really know what they want, the discussion is straight to the point of like what business problem they are trying to solve using artificial intelligence and how AIbacked can help them reach those goals. The second type of organization who want to adapt AI but still unclear on how to go about it, there the discussion is more around talking about what is really possible with AI, what can be done and what cannot be done, because both are equally important for the organizations to know before they adapt AI into their organization. So a lot of interaction around and discussion around them. And finally, the organizations who are still not clear about if there is there an application for AI? Do I really need to adapt AI? So there, as one of the pioneer startups when it comes to AI for food, we have the responsibility to educate them. So that's where we organize events like this, where we try to educate and make people aware of what is possible with artificial intelligence and why they should look at AI to make it part of their organization strategy and not to be left behind.
And for those that are unaware, could you maybe give a quick kind of elevator pitch on AIbacked and what you're doing with AI?
Sure. So at AIbacked, we help the companies with their new product innovation. So for example, if a company wants to launch a new juice in a market like Indonesia, our platform will tell them what kind of juice they should launch next so that it is successful. And we do that by using artificial intelligence and machine learning, by analyzing the big data around food that is created by the consumers every day.
Got it. Fantastic. Now I'm keen to hear from, what would be a potential customer of AIbacked, Indrani and Enid, coming from the multinational corporation side of things. How have each of your organizations been adopting AI, whether that is kind of internally driven initiatives or working with, an external service provider such as AIbacked? Indrani, maybe we'll kick things off with you, and then we'll move over to Enid.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Thomas. Yeah, indeed, with Danone, we have. I was trying to think of when Som was giving the example, where do we fall in? So are we on 1, 2, or 3? And I think we are probably somewhere between 1 and 2 as a company, which is more about aware of the importance of AI and really trying to figure out what could be the scope of AI within our organization. There is a big team which is working on it. So I think we are totally AI converts, which means that we are very fully convinced that AI is here to stay and AI is going to change the game. And Danone needs to be on the bandwagon of AI sooner than later. But we are also trying to figure our way around it. And what we are really trying to do is that we do have initiatives which are AI backed. One of the initiatives which is happening as we speak is an initiative where we have an MVP, a minimum viable program currently being worked upon on trend scoping and trend mapping, which is really to identify trends, which is a very, very big topic today, I think, in the industry, because we really need to make sure that we as an industry and we as a company are aware of the trends, are able to leverage the ones which are already on, and it becomes a red ocean. But we really need to find trends which are either emerging or even dormant and will at some stage become bigger, because that's where we can create some blue ocean spaces. So that's where we are looking at and it is a very, very big initiative for the organization where we have started with a pilot in one country, and we are trying to scope it out and really perfect it and then move it to across markets. And then I also believe that, across the organization, across different divisions, we will start using AI more and more. So whether it is strategy and insights division for consumer insights, whether it is R&I for product development, etc. I think we will start using AI more and more. And the first thing that we have started doing as an organization is really try and understand how we can use this, how we can use AI for trend scoping and trend mapping.
Fantastic. Enid, how is Diageo doing anything similar or dissimilar? And I don't know if you can pinpoint kind of where you are in the spectrum that Som outlined.
Yeah, I think Som probably know better than I do, probably. I don't know where he puts it, Diageo, but I also think that probably between 1 and 2 would be where we are. Very excited about the opportunity in AI and see lots of potential opportunities. And then I think in terms of where we are focusing at this moment in time is also on trend mapping and identification as well, trying to have a, would love to have a crystal ball to look into the future and know what consumers going to do and give them what they would like and really delight the consumers. So that would be one of the primary objectives. But we also started from a place where we are helping them to navigate categories that are potentially a little bit more complex for them to understand in the spirit world. So we actually have an initiative called What's Your Whiskey? So using AI to help consumers to understand what would be a whiskey that would be suitable for their palate. So that has been gaining a lot of good tractions within the company and with consumers. So something that we want to learn more and understand more and see how we can apply that even further.
I'll definitely be looking that up after. John, let's round things out from you on the investment side. What companies has AgFunder invested in that use AI, and what got AgFunder excited about those companies?
Yeah, thanks, Tommy. I was gonna tell Enid if she needs additional volunteers for What's Your Whiskey, feel free to sign us up. No, I think from AgFunder's perspective, we're definitely all on board the AI train. I think from the investment diligence side, we've embraced AI and machine learning. We're developing an in-house proprietary system to help us with our deal flow analysis. AgFunder's been around for about 8 years, and we've established a data set of some 30,000 companies which we've seen in this time. And obviously the challenge of the investment team always is to sort of filter through new deals to decide who to invest in. And so we've adopted AI techniques to, I guess, try to quantify and objectify certain aspects of new deals when they come across our plates. But to answer your question, I think this is really a space which we're super excited about. And obviously today's panel is largely constructed from more of the consumer product innovation lens. Obviously, we can talk about many of the other different aspects that AI plays, or the roles that AI can play in our food system today. Just to name a few, obviously, in addition to consumer taste preferences, which Som is all about, we've got food purchasing habits, recommendations on sort of our smartphone, sort of pumping us the sort of products which we most often order on, whether it's food deliveries and all the rest of that. We've got closer, I guess, further upstream or in the supply chain, we've been looking at companies which are utilizing AI to advance, food safety, allergen prevention, ingredient discovery, to name a few. Actually, if I can just cite an example, another one of our portfolio companies, which we're really proud of, obviously, got to give a shout out to AIbacked. But another one of our companies, which we're really proud of, is a company out of the US called Brightseed Bioscience. They're using AI to rapidly identify bioactives and phytonutrients, which essentially exist in food crops and plant species for use as healthy food additives and dietary supplements. I think Indrani might be familiar with the name, because I believe they're doing some work with Danone. But just to give an example, we think about antioxidants in blueberries as a sort of commonly appreciated sort of benefit of consuming blueberries. But when you consider that, maybe less than 1% of the world's plant species and phytonutrients have been identified, you can imagine the sort of wealth of natural ingredients to improve sort of human health is out there and being sort of untapped. And that's where the Brightseed Forager platform comes into play, to be able to analyze and identify all these extraordinary compounds available to us.
I mean, that's, yeah, so to your beginning points, I mean, that's interesting that AgFunder has taken a dose of its own medicine, started to practice what you preach and bringing AI, internally into your investment operations. And then certainly sounds like you're investing in some exciting companies that have embraced AI. Now I want to dive a little bit deeper and go beyond just the facts of what you all have done. What has been the impact? Anything in terms of, return on investment, more efficient operations, whatever it may be. So Enid, maybe we'll start with you on this one. Any kind of impressions that you've gotten from the, What's My Whiskey initiative or any other trend forecasting tools that Diageo is using?
Yeah, so I think for us, the most impressive thing is the turnaround time. Traditionally, when we have to hunt for a trend, it requires a lot of experience and a lot of instinct, and can be a little bit more science, more art than science. But now with AI, we found that we've got a lot more confidence in terms of what we found, and also have numbers to date to back it up, and then we can make very strategic and informed choices of what we go after. So that has been kind of one of the some of the biggest benefits that we saw with AI, using AI in this area.
And Indrani, how about you? I know it sounds like the one initiative you referred to is still kind of early stage with the minimal viable program, but any kind of early impacts that you've seen from that or other initiatives?
So yeah, indeed. So we are at an early stage on this overall trend mapping, which we believe AI is going to revolutionize for the company, and we want to kind of take it ahead for the whole company as a whole. And then beyond that, I think what we are really trying to do, and in the space of strategy and insights, we do try to we are trying to integrate and incorporate more and more of AI learning into our insight building and strategy building. So we are still at early stages as far as that is concerned, but I think that is the idea, that at the moment the way we are working specifically on strategy and insights is that really partnering with a new age players and new age vendors to use methodologies which are much more agile and much more AI centric to come up with information and insights much more real time, much faster, and much more instinctive and intuitive rather than reactive. We also believe that as we start looking at things which are more AI driven and more agile, some get into information, and we might unravel insights which could be much more intuitive, data backed, but at the same time intuitive, versus taking a much longer time and coming up with information which might be filtered through some bias, and I think more and more we are trying to look for information which is coming from an unbiased lens, more data backed, and also faster and agile. And the way we are going about it is trying to use AI vendors, or basically agencies who are working with AI as a platform as well, to unravel the insights, etc. From our consumers.
So it seems like the common tie between Danone and Diageo is speed to insight, and then arriving at an insight with a higher degree of confidence. Yeah. Som, would you agree? Is that kind of what you've been able to deliver to your customers through AI Palette? Are there other kind of points of impact that you're delivering or have been seeing elsewhere?
Right. Absolutely. So it's in the similar lines where we are able to really accelerate the innovation process by understanding and identifying trends faster. So we say that we make the transporting piece 100 times faster and also 10 times cheaper compared to the traditional methods that are out there in the market. And also apart from that, so that's on the consumer insights piece. And also one of the recent initiative has been where we have been able to analyze a lot of technical publications and patent data to identify new ingredients for a large confectionery company. Because for the R&D team, the time to market is even longer. By the time they decide and identify something, it takes 2 years because the product is ready for commercialization. So by building the platform to also identify new ingredients and new raw materials which has been discovered some other part of the world, this really gives them a head start when it comes to commercialization.
Fantastic. I mean, you bring up a good point. Time is money, right? So if we're able to save time, we're also going to save money. That's interesting to hear as well. You kind of been able to broaden kind of the data set and that you can work with and extend yourself kind of into different parts of the new product development cycle. John, how about you from the investment side, whether it's, kind of internally, operationally, or, your portfolio companies like Brightsea that are using AI, how have they been progressing? Oh, John, you're on mute.
Sorry, rookie mistake. Yeah, no, happy to report. Again, I think as more corporations, the general community sort of recognizes the power of AI and embraces it. Essentially, it has led to a lot of success in a number of these companies which we've invested in a few years ago. I think, you mentioned earlier, Tommy, the sort of the impact that AI might deliver for your company. I think another way of looking at that is actually the sort of the impact that this technology actually sort of brings to the place where it's deployed. Another company which we've looked at, and I've spoken to their team here in Singapore. They're doing some really good stuff in the area of food waste. Winner is, like many other companies, trying to solve food waste issues. And I guess, when you hear the founder and CEO, he's talking about the fact that a third of all food produced around the world goes to waste every year, and so the way that they're trying to address the problem is cutting down on food waste by providing AI-enabled intelligence to chefs and commercial kitchens to, I guess, prevent them from over purchasing food which ultimately doesn't get cooked or consumed. And they do this by, sort of basic camera system mounted over bins, but then using AI and machine learning to identify the foods, identify the quantity that it's disposed and at the day, and how it fits into the menu, and ties that into obviously sort of customer ordering preferences in that place of the restaurant or whatever, and so it provides this sort of data analytics back to the chefs and the owners to essentially help them refine their menu offerings and ordering habits to cut down on food waste. Another company which came through our Grow Accelerator here in Singapore, part of our first cohort, Intello Labs from India, they use AI and machine learning to grade the quality of fresh produce as it sort of flows along the supply chain. Pretty sort of simplistic approach, but very effective, and again, sort of trying to cut down on sort of food wastage, providing a sort of layer of traceability in the supply chain as it moves from producer to distributor and ultimately consumer. Again, I think the success of these companies, the ability for them to go on and raise, subsequent funding rounds, all attests to the application, the long-term application and embracing of AI in the marketplace.
Fantastic. Thank you for those additional kind of data points. I mean, so once again, I think we see kind of cost savings as another element, but then you rightly identify another benefit, which is kind of the X factor of sustainability and whatnot. So time, money, and sustainability, all very good things. But of course, this can't come without some growing pains, some challenges. Whether that's in terms of technically speaking, kind of turning on the AI engine and actually having it deliver something valuable, or just within your organization, trying to create that change and create that culture that embraces AI. So on either front, I would love to hear from you all kind of what have been those pain points, because they exist. We can't ignore them. So maybe you kind of what do you see as your kind of major barrier to growth as you in your own business as AI Palette, or kind of challenges that you've heard in discussions with your clients and prospects?
So one of the biggest challenge, I think, is the perception of AI in the general people's mind. Probably you have to blame the Hollywood movies for it. On one side, they show the Terminators who are going to replace humanity. On the other side, they show the super intelligent machines who has answer to everything. So I think we know that the reality lies somewhere in between. So a lot of times when we approach, we see the fear when it comes to adopting AI because a lot of it is unknown. So they are scared of the unknown on one side, or on the other side, they expect AI to have answer to everything. They want a product which they just need to click the button and the answer is right in front of it. But we know that AI, the true full form, should be augmented intelligence. It's just a tool which will enable us to do our jobs better. So I think that understanding needs to be there if an organization needs to adopt AI successfully within themselves.
Got it. And Indrani, maybe we'll go to you. Kind of what have, especially as you kind of look to scale up this minimum viable program and everything else, what do you see as the challenges?
Yeah, I think it's a good question at this moment, because we are indeed at a stage where we are building it. So we are realizing the questions which are coming up. So one of the things which I think, which I'm learning more and more, is that, indeed, just backing what Som just said, that this is, we have to take it with the right perspective. So this is actually a tool which will enable us to get data much faster, easier, probably better insights without bias. But at the same time, let us also remember that this is a learning, it's a learning tool, and it's a tool. It's not the answer of everything. And also one of the other things is that, as they say in everything, it's all about what goes in, you get commensurate out. So garbage in, garbage out, and so on. So when you are also working with AI, I think it's very important that, just giving an example of the work that we're doing at the moment, which is really trendscaping. It's absolutely imperative to look at, looking at what is the big data and what are the data sources that you've really put in to kind of then create the algorithm to finally come up with the product or the output that you're looking at. And have you really looked at the data which is going into, to make sure that you have the right data points, the right angles in, to ensure that what you get out at the end of the algorithm and what you get out at the end is something which is meaningful and useful, relevant, and definitely actionable as well. So I think this is general context and general sense that we probably do everything with, and it applies to AI as well. And I think we need to treat AI as also another tool which will really facilitate us and help us immensely, but at the same time, the general principles of data and business actually pretty much apply even on AI. So really making sure that when we are working on whatever we are working on, which uses AI, understand and scope it properly, and also make sure that the inputs and the data points and the big data that we are scoping out to work on and create the algorithm are the right ones, making sure we don't miss out anything, which can then really ensure that the output is super relevant and valuable and actionable. And I think that's a realization which is important, and that also brings in pain points, because you need to be very clear and aware of, therefore, what are the inputs and what are the ingredients that you put in, and do the due diligence accordingly.
Yeah, I can't remember if I got mentioned already, but I don't think we can say it enough. You put garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. Could you quickly expand? You mentioned about kind of the different data sources that you need to create forecasts around trends. Can you just talk a little bit about the different types of data sources that you're using, if you know them off the top of your head?
Yeah, so indeed, Som would be aware, because we've also discussed this with him. And I think, so we are a food company, and we are looking at obviously data sources in that context. And what we do is that what we are trying to look at is that when we look at the data sources, are all the data sources covered? So, are we covering the, the relevant context? Which is that if it's about food, are we covering context around, what is available in QSRs, menus, etc. Are we covering, elements around, patents, etc. Are we covering elements around, product categories, etc. Because also, using data from Nielsen or Euromonitor, etc. Because, what is interesting is also that when you include all this information, what are the categories which are growing, what are the categories which are not growing. So it kind of gives you an idea, even for the machine to learn about, okay, what could be the trend. So is it something which it sees growing, or which it sees stagnant, and so on. So there is data source which would probably come from Nielsen and Euromonitor. There would also be data source coming from new product launches which are already happening in the market. I mean, if we have information on how those products are doing, that is fantastic. A lot of the time that information is not available, but through different formats like Mintel, etc. What are the new products which are currently coming in the market? What are the new claims, and so on? So we're trying to use data from different sources, coming from different angles, to make sure that what we put in this model is really something robust, and then the algorithm is built so that all things are taken into consideration to come up with the trends on the other end, and also then identify what are the trends which are emerging, which are dormant, and so on. So I guess there will be different things which will be used to create the algorithm. And also, I think there is another important element is also, I believe that because it is AI and machine learning, I think it progresses and becomes better over time. So probably to be aware of that as you develop, you might not be perfect from the first day onwards, but because it's a learning process, to also have that attitude of basically learning more and more as we go.
Tom, I saw your head nodding a little bit.
And improving and bettering the process.
Got it. Thank you, Indrani. Tom, I saw your head nodding quite a bit. Anything that you'd like to tack on to Indrani's response?
No, I'm very pleased to hear what Indrani said, and coming from a corporate, this understanding is very needed for implementing any AI initiative, to have that tolerance for error in the initial days, because it will need little time to learn and get better over a period.
I was actually I would just like to comment that, I was very much impressed with a comment which I heard from you in one of our interactions, which was really just, I think, tackled in one of the previous webinars, was around the capability of machine learning all languages. And this, because we know that when we work with data, and specifically big data, language data is very, very important because everybody doesn't speak English. And I think it was really interesting to hear that the machine has the capacity to learn the language and perfect it, and then it becomes like, much better than a human. And that kind of can really help to understand and unravel the data and better, because the data that is there in the market is language data. It's not all available in one language. So I think that was interesting, and that sort of made a lot of sense.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think it just underscores, you can have a lot of really good data sources and sets, but the heterogeneous nature makes things a lot more complicated. So whether it's different languages, whatever it may be, numeric versus text, images, whatever it may be. Enid, any kind of challenges that you have been able to jump over or anticipate going forward, whether that's technically speaking or just kind of in terms of kind of scaling up initiatives within Diageo?
Yeah, I think such that currently AI is such a buzzword within our world, right? I think one of the pain points or challenges is that I've now been bombarded with a lot of different agencies and people, calling me off the hook and emailing, about their capabilities. So sifting all of that through to find the right partner with the right capability is very, very critical for us, and hasn't been the most easiest, has been very time consuming for us. So I think that is something that we would always still, I think going forward, it will still be here, I think. And I don't think it will go away. If anything, it's probably going to get more. So I think we put ourselves on a very steep learning curve as a result. And it's both enriching, rewarding, but at the same time also challenging. And also how we bring the overall capability of the team on big data and AI up as well is also going to be a challenge as well, because I think we all start from slightly different points. Not by any means I'm claiming myself an expert, far from it, but definitely a lot to learn, and a lot will be required going forward as well.
And John, just to round things out with you, kind of any, maybe it's an instance where you couldn't, convince your investment committee to go into a certain company with AI, or, any kind of challenges that you've experienced as you kind of look to invest in this area?
Actually, I'll answer the question more from our use of AI in the investment decision. Sure. Obviously, we're actively developing and refining this AI model, and figuring out sort of how much do we rely on it. It goes back to Indrani's point about just not forgetting or not losing sight of sort of just basic sort of business, say processes or sort of more established conventions. Now, ultimately, in early stage venture capital, there's so many scenarios or different sort of assumptions one has to make when ultimately making a decision on whether or not to invest in a company. And we can certainly look at sort of machine learning algorithms to spit out an advice or something based on this particular company's profile and its founder's profile and all the rest of that. I think, obviously, as in the world of VC, only time will tell in terms of how accurate these suggestions are in terms of the company's ability to go on and be successful. We're in our we've been building our database over the last 8 years, but we're only in our sort of fourth year of investment. And so again, as I alluded to before, a number of these AI companies that we've invested in have gone on to be successful. However, it's too small of a sample really to make a overarching conclusion from. We'll continue to, I guess, refine our own experience in terms of investment success when we consider AI as a component to that decision-making process.
Yeah, I mean, because you're dealing with a longer term horizon even than Enid or Indrani, CPG products. You're going to know whether they're good or bad within 6 months to 2 years. Investment into a VC-backed company, that's 5 to 10 years. So can understand the pain points there. Now let's kind of put things into context with what's going on in the world around us, and especially kind of as things unraveled last year with COVID and kind of economic impacts and consumer impacts of that. How have the events of 2020, although it still feels like it's ongoing, informed your 2021 strategy, especially as it pertains to AI? So Enid, maybe we'll kick things off with you on this one.
Sure. So 2020 is unique, right? I think we've seen in multiple industries and sectors that within months of time see years of advancement. I think that's what we're seeing in terms of our industry as well, mostly through how consumers interact with our categories, and the amount of variety and differences we see across the world has been massive, and the speed that is changing is massive. So that actually prompted us to think that AI could even be more useful and important for us going forward to understand these changes. Indrani talked about agility, and I think AI can potentially be a really powerful tool to help us to adapt in a very agile way of how our consumers are changing their consumption and behaviors. And that is something that we are really focused on looking at the moment.
Johnny, looks like we're perhaps about to chime in with something there.
No, I think, I mean, of course, what we saw with COVID was, and in many of the markets in the region, is that the way, e-commerce developed and the way digital has developed has been phenomenal, in the sense is that it has kind of it has been beyond belief, and therefore I think connected to that also, I think the whole, because now we are much more digital as a company. So of course we've been digital, but the concept of going completely digital on some of the functions, one of them being insights, because we are no longer using face-to-face interactions, we are fully digital. Unraveling some amazing insights in that, and I think that's just the first step. And as we are going on this, we will therefore adapt, I think, AI more and more. Look at what, now that we have moved fully digital, how can we leverage AI, to crack more insights, to create more insights, etc. So I would say that, of course, the work that we have just started has been in 2020. It has been probably a function of many things, but also the fact that the whole world moved completely online. The whole world moved completely digital into many aspects. Some things have gone so many folds, or have grown so many folds, that was not even imagined. That some of these the AI-driven initiatives and activities activities have really been preponed or activated faster because of this. And I also see that this is all only to kind of stay on. And some of the things that we have now discovered as a part of learning because of having moved completely digital in 2020, I think we will retain, not because out of compulsion, which is happening now, but out of learning and actually more higher relevance. So we will probably totally shift some of the things on how we manage insights, how we manage qualitative interactions, etc. Perhaps much more digitally compared to what we have been. And this will further also accelerate the use of AI in many fronts.
And Indrani or Enid, if you can speak to this, in terms of being able to, consumers are now spending more time at home than ever. How has that changed the way that your companies are getting consumer feedback in terms of, are you doing like video, taste tests or anything like that? Anything that you can speak to there?
Yes, go on, Indrani, go please.
No, go on, Enid. I think maybe you're going to.
Yeah, so I think in terms of getting consumer feedback, we have gone a lot more in home testing versus the traditional kind of central location test would be one. But we also be very cognizant of kind of the impact of COVID as well, and didn't want to create any further risks for our consumers. So we have been quite careful and selective in what we do as a company as a result of COVID in terms of getting that. But we are getting more data from other sources. So in terms of sales data, online and other platforms. So we're trying to like diversify our data sources a bit more so we can get, more real-time feedback through other ways than the traditional way.
Got it. Okay, fantastic. Let's move on to, I want to kind of expand a little bit on some elements that we touched on briefly before.
Maybe I can. No, Thomas, just on that point, I wanted to just add quickly, if I may.
Yep.
No, I just wanted to say that, also in Danone, we have moved completely online. And yes, totally, as Enid said, we have been also very careful about keeping to the rules and the regulations across markets. One thing which we have started realizing, and this is something which we have just started hearing from our agencies, is that with the quality. And so first of all, of course, starting from, we're so used to doing face-to-face, specifically in this part, to going online, there was already a bit of a concern. Can we do it? Are we going to get the right insights? And of course, there's still this whole thing of Wi-Fi and data quality, etc. In many markets, specifically in the, a little bit beyond big cities. But once we cracked some of those elements, we have actually started realizing that the quality of the data can actually improve, because people are talking from the comfort of their homes. They're probably also talking from the comfort of a screen, not necessarily always getting influenced by each other in a group. We were just discussing with one of our agencies today that, sometimes in a group you have one person who's speaking predominantly and dominates the group. And whereas when you have these interactions where there are maybe 8 people connecting from different places, they all have their opinions, which are not necessarily highly the same as the other one. And they are able to communicate that much more, giving us richer, more diverse, real data and real insights compared to maybe in a group. So that's why I was saying that some of these things can be actual real learnings, which we might then follow up with seminal work and perhaps change the way that we do interactions and do consumer visits and things like that forever. Not for the fact that we're doing it out of compulsion, but more for the fact that it's probably better data quality and so on. So I think that might also be coming as a result.
Well, I mean, we talked about removal of bias. It's interesting how you change kind of the external environment that the consumer is sitting in terms of when you're doing those testing. And yeah, I agree. Doing it at home can certainly help remove some of that bias. To the question that I was just starting to get at, we've touched on elements throughout the conversation, but I think it is important, kind of the art of selling AI. Whether that's internally to your organization, externally to consumers, to different stakeholders. It's really important that we're able to successfully navigate that to kind of scale some of these AI initiatives and have broader rollouts. So maybe Som and John, we can hear from you on this one. Som, we'll start with you. Kind of how have you been able to, especially as a hungry startup, how are you tackling this?
Right. So according to research by Forbes, 70% of the AI initiatives bring little or no results. That's a very high rate of failure. And the major reason identified for that was not technology. That's leadership and management. Right. So what we have seen is that typically the decision is taken by the higher management, who are pretty much convinced that they need to adopt AI. But when it comes to the next level of management or the people at ground level who are more responsible for implementing it, they are not aligned with what the organization wants. So that is one of the bigger challenges that we have seen. So what we really need to make sure is that everybody is aligned from the top to bottom on what is the objective. And the second challenge that we see a lot of time is that the business problem is not clearly outlined. It's not very clear what they want to achieve with this particular tool. A lot of time it's about, okay, we need AI, let's go ahead and do something. So to make sure that whatever you are working on reaches and has a good outcome, we need to have a very clear, specific business problem with clearly defined target and goals, which can be measured from time to time.
Yeah, you can't manage what you can't measure. John, we'll end with you on this question.
Yes, Som mentioned 70% of AI-backed ventures fail. Well, it's still a better probability than venture capital when it comes to investing in early stage companies. But I think if I was to try to tie the two together, and sorry, let me just interrupt myself. I like to think we have better probability and success rates than that. But no, all jokes aside, the one thing which we've noticed over the past sort of 12 to 18 months in a particular segment of agri-food tech, which we invest across the spectrum. We're not specific to, say, deep tech or AI only. But one area which has obviously been really hot of late is alternative proteins, whether it's cell-based, plant-based, the next Impossible Burger or whatever, plant-based milk. And a number of, just we're talking about, I guess, the fallacies perhaps of AI, or selling it, right? The number of decks that have come across our way, or applications we've received, where they're the next sort of lentil protein burger, which is using AI to find the next sort of like amazing plant ingredient or whatever. And you're like, really? Okay, please tell us about your sort of technology platform. And it's like, grandma in the kitchen, sort of whatever, giving her feedback. But no, you've obviously got to be, we've become a bit sort of skeptical with a number of sort of, as you say, catchphrases or sort of slogans being tossed around in this space. Everyone's just trying to, I guess, market themselves with different lingo. I'll stop there. Sorry, more of an comical anecdotal share than anything really insightful.
No, I think you highlight that there's a lot of overselling going on, and where I think what Som is describing, the need to be very logical and credible in the way that we kind of pitch some of these AI initiatives internally and externally. We have gotten some good questions in from the audience. And so we've had a couple around kind of the use of AI in food manufacturing. So as we look to kind of the end of the product development cycle, that commercialization stage that's ever so crucial, have any of you seen anything around the use of AI in that? Maybe Som or Enid, anything that perhaps you've seen?
So one of the applications that we see with quite good results is when it comes to predictive maintenance of machines. So you don't really need to wait till the machine breaks down. You can use AI based on the machine data, the temperature, how long it has been running, to predict when is the right time for maintenance. So that cuts down the time that is typically needed for maintenance. Another application of AI is when it comes to planning the batches better. So if you have a factory where you are producing multiple products, which one you should plan when, so that you can have the maximum output. So these are some of the top of the mind applications of AI that we are already seeing in the market today.
Sure, and I'm sure that that can extend to in terms of kind of managing quality and safety within the manufacturing facility as well. Enid or anyone else, anything to that extent that you've seen?
I've seen AI using in managing food safety through testing. Because a lot of those analysis requires could be speeded up by using, for example, DNA sequencing and stuff like that, and it's a huge amount of data. So I've seen technology out there who can look at that in a more holistic way, and managing the big data to predict what could be the potential problems with your plant and your manufacturing line. But must admit, I haven't looked into it very deeply, but it was something that I found quite exciting because it's looking at food safety and in a more predictive sort of way.
Okay, we also had a couple other questions around kind of an interesting intersection that John just started to talk about, the intersection of AI and alternative proteins. The two questions that we've got are talking about cell-based meat as well as traditional animal food production systems. John, anything you've seen there in your deal flow, or perhaps one you've actually invested
in? Hard to make the connection with AI, perhaps, but obviously, when you're looking at companies like any of these cell agriculture players here in Singapore, we've got Shock Meats, Turtle Tree, any of these guys. Obviously, a lot of what they are iterating on is to find lower cost growth media solutions, which is 80 to 90% of the cost of goods, the actual finished product, when you're trying to produce a kilogram of whether it's sort of beef or shrimp meat or whatever. It's this. So I know a number of these companies have been working with traditional sort of pharmaceutical companies to try to identify natural sort of plant-based alternatives to, I guess, what's typically available on the market. And so, perhaps, I don't know, using some of these machine learning type processes to identify that. Similar, I guess, to the example that I gave about Brightseed Bioscience, where they're obviously scouring the plant kingdom to identify these phytonutrients. Not sure if that really answers the question.
Yeah, and then just to kind of tack on to that myself, there's the company Shiru that they're using AI and machine learning to identify high functioning proteins that would then be formulated into a plant-based product. So a natural protein that's going to have that that gelling, that emulsifying, that foaming property, all of that formulation functionality to create a great tasting product. So similar kind of navigation of the natural world out there. Mm-hmm. Anything else from the other panelists that they've seen in terms of intersection of AI and just protein products in general?
There is this company called as the Knot Company, based out of Chile. So they have used AI to identify what kind of ingredients they can use to replace the animal protein that is there. So first product was the mayonnaise, which was the Knot mayonnaise, and then they launched a range of plant alternatives. So the unique thing is that they use AI to study the chemical structure of the different ingredients, and then they say which plant ingredient is most suitable for replacing the animal ingredient. And this year they also entered in the US market.
Fantastic. Okay.
And I think I think what I would be interested in, is, the way the whole plant protein has come about. I mean, it was obviously coming, but it seems to have gone through an acceleration. What would be really interesting to see is with AI and machine learning, which I suppose is a combination of also time series data and work which is at the back end, which creates the algorithm to kind of give us a prediction of where are we going to land with this trend. Because what is important is to kind of say, okay, are we really going to, because I'm from a dairy industry, I'm from a dairy company, are we at one point going to look at completely dairy being replaced by plant proteins, all kinds of formats. So I mean, because we know that at this moment there is a plant, but there is also lab-based proteins which are able to create milk, we are also able to convert that into different formats of cheese, etc. All of that, which is what we know plant proteins are not able to do. So are we able to then going to get to a place where the entire dairy industry is going to be at risk? Are we going to be completely overtaken by this because sustainability and planet is going to become an important consideration? Or are we going to, is this just going to be a peripheral trend? Is this going to become something which is going to be much more mainstream than what it is in the next few years? That would be something super interesting, and I would really expect AI to be able to help us see that in advance with predictability.
Fantastic. Okay, we're heading towards the top of the hour here. I want to end with a quick rapid fire round of questioning, and 30 seconds or less from each of you. Imagine we're all sitting here, 1 year from now in 2022. What do you think will be your proudest accomplishment with respect to adopting AI in your organization? So Indrani, how about you first?
Maybe I can be really short about it. So indeed, the MVP that we have started to do it successfully with some real strong outcomes, which are also intuitive and very actionable, and be able to roll it out across markets on trends prediction.
I think mine would be very short as well. Similarly, I think would like to be able to roll out AI in trend prediction and monitoring across more markets to help us inform our strategy for innovation.
Good. John?
Yeah, I think tangible evidence that an AI-enabled sort of deal selection actually is providing value to the portfolio. And I think on a parallel, just seeing AI palette go from strength to strength, obviously deciding to invest in this company and seeing them continue to succeed.
All right, Sam, it's your turn now.
Yeah. So, when we started AI Palette, we started with the vision of democratizing data and insights for everyone, even those who cannot use IBM and Microsoft. So at the end of the year, if we are able to reach out to more companies and help them create new products with the use of artificial intelligence, we'll feel that, yeah, we have achieved a lot.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I'll be checking on you all a year from now. Make sure you did your homework. Great. Well, I think we heard a lot in terms of how AI for food industry planning can help save time, save money, and then deliver some sort of X factor, whether that's sustainability, removal of bias. I think there's a lot of data points that the panel shared today. So I thank you all for that. And thank you all, the audience, for your time. So now I'll hand it back over to Jody to close things out. Thank you all.
Thank you, Thomas, for the closing as well as the amazing moderation for our session. And on behalf of SG Debate, I would like to also give special mention to the rest of our panelists. Thank you to Enid, John, Som, and Indrani for joining today's discussion. We would also like to thank our partner, AI Palette, for making this event possible. Thank you to all the attendees for tuning in as well as staying till the end of the session. And while we may not be able to answer all the questions due to time constraint, we hope that the insights shared were valuable enough, and you can also keep a lookout for our post-event EDM as well as a recording of this session to look back. We will also appreciate it if you could drop your feedback on this webinar after this session, and join us for the rest of our events on SG Debate. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening, morning, or afternoon from wherever you're tuning in from. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.